Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome into our latest TDR Cannabis in 5, presented by Dutchie. I'm your host, Shad Dales, and today we're going to take a closer look at what's happening in Florida, where the state's top legalization campaign is suing the government over what they call an unlawful attempt to throw out more than 200,000 signatures tied to their 2026 ballot initiative. This grabbed a lot of people's attention. This story was first reported by Marijuana Moment, and it's a big one because it shows how complicated and political the path to legalization can get, even in states that have strong public support, which Florida does. But before we get into what's happening and why, let's take a moment to recognize the group behind the push and one of the biggest names involved. So we welcome you into our latest TDR Cannabis in 5, presented by Dutchie. All right, so if you followed Florida's cannabis story over the years, you'll know the name John Morgan. Yeah, he's been running a few ads with us recently. He's the founder of Morgan & Morgan, and it's one of the largest injury law firms in America, and he's been a driving force in cannabis reform across the state. Some of you may know that Morgan helped finance the campaign that legalized medical marijuana back in 2016, and now he's once again lending his voice and support to the new adult use effort. So really, let's connect some of these dots here. With Morgan's involvement in funding, there's weight obviously behind this campaign, but that also means there's some pushback, and that's where the latest lawsuit begins. And before we unpack this whole story, just a quick word from Morgan & Morgan right now. Hey everyone, there's a reason smart investors celebrate when their portfolio jumps 40% in a year, just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Think about it. When you're investing, you want the right team in your corner. The same is true if you're injured in dealing with an insurance company, and that is where Morgan & Morgan comes into the equation. Why? Well, they've got more than 1,000 attorneys and over 100 offices nationwide, and they've been fighting for people for over 35 years, and their track record is hard to ignore. Let me explain a little bit further. Case in point, in Florida, a client was offered $350,000, but walked away with $12 million. In Pennsylvania, another client, they turned $650,000 offer into $26 million. That's a 40x return. So in total, Morgan & Morgan, they've recovered more than $25 billion for over 500,000 clients. So really, when you hire him, it's like bringing in a legal army that has your back. Because if you're injured due to someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. And let's be honest, not all law firms are created equal. But with Morgan & Morgan, their fee is free unless they win. You can start your claim right now by clicking the link in the description below or by scanning this QR code on your screen with your phone. At the end of the day, if you want what you deserve, make sure you go in with the right team by contacting Morgan & Morgan today. Now, let's get back to the rest of our video. All right, let's now get back into Florida and what we're talking about here. The group leading Florida's adult use campaign is called Smart and Safe Florida, which, again, a lot of you are familiar with. They've been working to put a new legalization initiative on the 2026 ballot, a measure that would allow adults 21 and older to purchase and use cannabis legally. But just a few days ago, that same campaign, they filed a lawsuit against the state, specifically against Secretary of State Cord Bird and Leon County Supervisor of Elections Mark Early. According to the complaint, the Secretary's office instructed all county supervisors to invalidate petitions that didn't include a full printed copy of the proposed amendment when the voters signed. You believe this? So here's the problem. The campaign urges there's no Florida law that requires that. They say the rule was invented after the fact and that it's a clear overreach of state authority. Something doesn't make sense here. So now they're suing. They're asking the court to stop those invalidations and reinstate roughly 200,000 petition signatures that had been thrown out. And I can see why. So again, this all comes from a detailed reporting from our friends Tom and Marijuana Moment. So really, what's at stake here? Well, let's dive into some of those numbers because that's what will decide whether legalization even gets a vote. So to make the 2026 ballot, the campaign needs 880,062 verified signatures by February 1st, 2026. And right now, they've got about 662,000 verified, meaning they still need around 218,000 more. So if these 200,000 petitions are then tossed out permanently, the campaign could lose months of progress and millions of dollars worth of organizing work. So that's why this lawsuit indeed matters. It's not just about procedure, let's face it, it's about survival. So if the court rules in the campaign's favor, those signatures will indeed come back into play and the path to the ballot remains open. If not, Florida's adult use effort could stall out before voters even see the question. More obstacles being created here in Florida. It's not an easy path. But the fight isn't happening in isolation. Florida already voted on adult use legalization in 2024, but the measures we know fell short of the 60% approval needed to amend the state constitution. So since then, organizers have revised the language, tightening restrictions on public use, marketing, and packaging to make it more acceptable to cautious voters and lawmakers. But meanwhile, Governor Ron DeSantis and other state officials have made it clear they don't support broad legalization, calling it a gateway issue. No data to back that up. So that means the political environment remains hostile, and legal tactics like this could easily become a way to delay reform without debating it directly. And we know DeSantis is a pro at this in a negative way. So the result, a drawn-out process that keeps reform advocates stuck in court instead of on the ballot. So why does this all matter? And you might ask, why should anyone outside Florida care about this story? Well, in case you've been hiding under a rock, Florida could become the biggest legal recreational market in the world. Because what's really happening here, it could become a blueprint for how other states challenge ballot initiatives they don't like. If Florida's Secretary of State succeeds in invalidating petitions under a new interpretation of the rules, other states could follow that playbook, especially in the South, where cannabis reform remains politically divisive. So there's a lot at play here. It's also a test for how far administrative agencies can go in challenging election procedures midstream. For advocates and investors alike, that uncertainty, it adds, again, real risks. Add that to the list of concerns here in the cannabis industry. So imagine building a business model across a potential legal market and then finding out a procedural change wiped the ballot effort off the map. So that's the kind of volatility this industry still faces, even here in 2025. And let's not forget, Florida is the third most populous state in America. As I said, if adult use passes, the market potential would be massive. It would rival and exceed states like California or New York, and arguably become the largest recreational market in the world. Industry analysts estimate the state could generate billions in annual retail sales within just a few years, and that's before factoring in tourism and ancillary businesses. You get around 130 million tourists per year. Think about that. So that's why major operators and investors are already deeply involved, and according to state disclosures, Smart and Safe Florida has raised tens of millions of dollars from cannabis companies, including some of the largest multi-state operators. Think Curaleaf, think Trulieve, think Verano, on and on and on. So now you add in John Morgan's public backing, and this campaign has both funding and visibility. But as this lawsuit shows, even with money, progress isn't guaranteed. Maybe we got to spend more. So really, what should you take away from this story right now? First, legalization is as much about lawyering as it is about legislating. Procedural fights like how petitions are verified can decide the future of entire markets. And then second, Florida's case is a reminder that reform campaigns need airtight compliance and documentation from day one. Even small technicalities can be weaponized later, which we're seeing right now. And then third, public support, it doesn't automatically equal political success. Polls consistently show that more than 65% of Floridians support adult use legalization, yet here we are fighting over signatures. And finally, if Florida does make it to the 2026 ballot and passes legalization, it could shift the entire political landscape across the Southeast. That's why both sides are treating this as a must-win battle. To me, change is inevitable, so let's make this happen. So to recap, Florida's main legalization campaign, Smart and Safe Florida, is suing the state after officials invalidated roughly 200,000 signatures. They argue the state is enforcing new petition requirements that don't exist in law. If the court rules against them, the campaign could miss the 2026 ballot entirely. The story, which was again first reported by Marijuana Moment, underscores how fragile the legalization process still is, even in large, well-funded states. So we'll keep watching this closely, especially as the case moves through the courts and deadlines get tighter. I'm Shad Dales. This has been our latest TDR Cannabis in 5 presented by Dutchie. If you found it helpful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe below. And for more updates on state-level cannabis reform, follow us right here on YouTube or at thedalesreport.com. In the meantime, enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.